The alarms rang through the Hall of Accord long before anyone understood why. The Galactic Council had gathered for what they expected would be a routine vote-in, another quiet decision made from the safety of their towering chamber. Far from the dust and noise of any real battlefield, they were comfortable. They were certain. And they were wrong. For years, they had studied Earth from afar, calling it a developing world, a place full of unpredictable life forms, volatile emotions, and a talent for stumbling into chaos. The Council had mocked humanity's stubbornness, their strange mix of brilliance and recklessness, their refusal to bend even when the universe seemed determined to break them. But as Earth's signals grew stronger and its machines louder, the Council began to see humanity not as a curiosity, but as a possible threat. So they took a vote. It wasn't even close. Most representatives agreed that Earth, with its expanding technology and unpredictable spirit, should be neutralized and reorganized before it grew into something that could challenge the old powers. They spoke lightly as they cast their votes, laughing at the idea that humans would ever know what was decided here. After all, no species had ever risen fast enough to catch the Council off guard. But as the final vote was cast, something strange happens. Something no one in the chamber could explain. A low hum, so subtle at first it could have been mistaken for the wind against the walls, began to rise. It grew deeper, richer, vibrating through the room until even the eldest members, whose senses had dulled with centuries, felt it pulse against their bones. The lights dimmed. The air thickened, and every screen in the hall flickered to black dot. Then a single message appeared. It was short. It was human. And it was not supposed to be possible. "We see you." No one spoke. The silence cracked like thin ice. Human technology was decades, centuries away from intercepting encrypted Council transmissions. And yet the message glowed there, bright and unwavering, like a challenge thrown down at the feet of every species present. Before anyone could react, a second message blinked into existence. This one accompanied by an audio signal grainy, distorted, unmistakably from Earth. "You think we're unaware," the voice said, calm but carrying a hint of something sharper beneath the surface. "You think we're unprepared?" The room erupted into frantic murmurs, wings and tendrils and metal limbs shifting in every direction. Some demanded explanations. Others wanted to call off the vote. A few, the oldest and most cautious, whispered what none of them wanted to believe: humanity had somehow breached their most protected network. But the voice continued, unshaken. "You study us like a distant storm," it said. "You watch, you measure, you assume you have time. But storms don't wait. They grow." The message faded. The lights snapped back on. And for the first time in its long, proud history, the Galactic Council felt something it had nearly forgotten: fear. Not of humanity's weapons or ships. They still believed they could crush those easily, but of something far more unsettling. Humanity's awareness, humanity's timing, humanity's will in the chaos that followed. The Council called for emergency reports from every outpost near Earth's system. Some signals came through, shaky but intact, describing strange disturbances in known emissions, sudden surges in power grids, unexplained objects appearing on long-range scans. Other outposts simply stayed silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that wasn't natural. A representative from a crystalline species tried to regain control of the room, insisting that humans must have stumbled into some kind of accidental broadcast. Another argued that this was simply a bluff. But the younger Council members weren't so sure. They had watched the humans more closely than the others, listened to their broadcasts, their music, their languages. They had seen that strange, persistent spark of stubborn insistence to reach beyond their limits. No matter how many times they failed, one member finally spoke up. Her voice steady despite the tension. "We underestimated them," she said. "Humans don't need to be the strongest in the galaxy. They just need to be determined. The others dismissed her words. But she wasn't wrong. Across the chamber, a new set of data flashed onto the main display reports from a scout ship stationed at the edge of Earth's system. The feed was jittery, its visuals warped by interference. But through the distortion, shapes began to emerge, ship-like silhouettes, sleek and unfamiliar, glowing with a kind of energy the Council didn't recognize. The observers leaned in. The shapes moved with purpose, too organized, too deliberate, and far too advanced to belong to Earth. Except they did. The Scout's final transmission came through. Its audio filled with static and something else's sound, almost like laughter. Not mocking, but awestruck. They built them in secret, the Scout whispered. Right under our sensors. How did they? How could they? The transmission cut out before finishing. A quiet panic settled over the Council. Humans weren't supposed to have technology like this. They weren't supposed to be capable of hiding anything from the Council's surveillance systems. They weren't supposed to know about the vote, and yet here they were. Doing all of those things at once. The Council couldn't even agree on what the human ships were made of. Their readings contradicted one another. Some said metal, others energy, others something entirely new. The ships seemed to shift as they were scanned, as if they knew they were being watched. The room trembled again, as if the entire hall felt the weight of the moment. Up until now, the Council had always considered humans reckless, emotional, undisciplined. But no one had ever considered what might happen if those same qualities were sharpened by pressure, united by fear, and fueled by the knowledge that the galaxy had voted against them. Someone finally whispered what the others didn't want to admit. If they know we plan to invade, they'll act first. The Council fell silent. A trembling calm spread through the chamber, and for the first time, they realized they no longer held the upper hand. Humanity had always been unpredictable, but now they were something far more dangerous: motivated, unified, aware. The hum returned not from their screens this time, from the chamber floor itself. A soft vibration rising from deep within the structure, as though something beneath them had awakened. Lights flickered. Walls shook. A gust of cold air swept through the room. A final message appeared, not threatening, not loud, but resolute. You voted. We heard you. Now hear us. The words lingered, pulsing with a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. Before the Council could react, the display shifted again, revealing the unmistakable outline of a human figure, not detailed. Just a silhouette, standing tall, shoulders squared. The shape leaned forward slightly, as if staring directly into the chamber, directly into the eyes of every frightened representative. Then the screen went. Black dot. No one moved, no one breathed, and deep in the silence that followed, one thought echoed through every mind present. If this was humanity's response before the invasion even began, what would they do next? The Council never expected the answer, but it was already coming. The chamber stayed frozen long after the screen went dark, as if the entire Council feared that even the slightest movement might trigger whatever humanity had planned next. But the silence couldn't hold forever. One representative, thin, pale, unnervingly finally rose and demanded a full technical breakdown of the signal that had just appeared. Another called for an immediate lockdown of all Council systems. Others argued that they should send a diplomatic message before things escalated further. But beneath all the noise lay the truth none of them wanted to face. They didn't understand what had happened. They didn't even know where to begin. The technicians arrived within minutes. They scanned the walls, the floors, the central console. They checked the security relays, dug through the communication logs, even searched for physical tampering. Nothing made sense. The human message didn't follow any of the known pathways, yet it still traveled through them. It didn't match any recognized frequency. yet it was clearly centered on the Council's own encrypted channels. It was as if the message had woven itself into their system, slipping through cracks the Council didn't know existed. The oldest among them tried to brush it aside, claiming it had to be some kind of anomaly, maybe a glitch amplified by cosmic interference. But even they didn't sound convinced. Humanity had always pushed limits, but this was something else. Something sharper. Something intentional. One council member finally suggested reviewing the historical reports on humanity, the real reports, not the polished summaries. As the documents flashed onto the main screens, the council chamber dimmed again, as though the room itself understood the weight of what was being revealed. The earliest reports described Earth as a chaotic world filled with conflict and passion, unpredictable weather, and a species that kept rebuilding no matter how many times disaster struck. Other species had tried studying humans in the past but never stayed long. One early observer wrote that humans frightened them not because of their size or strength, but because of their persistence. Another noted how humans adapted to everything, even conditions that should have crushed them. They break, the report said, and then they rise again, stronger. But as the reports progressed, the Council noticed something strange. Surveillance logs from Earth's orbit grew less reliable. Sensor feeds became scattered, distorted, or cut off entirely. Outposts that monitored Earth from a safe distance started filing odd complaints, strange energy spikes. Signals that didn't match any human technology. Faint flashes of structures that vanished when scanned again. Some of these logs had been dismissed as equipment malfunctions, but now they looked like warnings the Council had ignored. One representative pointed to an old note buried deep in the archives. It described how humans used to send simple radio transmissions, music, news, random chatter. Then, without explanation, the volume of signals dropped. Humans hadn't stopped broadcasting, but they had become selective, careful about what they released into space. They were hiding something. The representative murmured. A younger member disagreed. No, they were learning. The room stirred at that, learning, adapting, preparing. Meanwhile, far from the Council's main chamber, the scout ships that orbited the edges of Earth's system continued to send fragmented reports. Some described bursts of light from the planet's surface too bright to be natural, too brief to identify. Others detected artificial structures rising and falling beneath the planet's clouds, as if they were built and hidden again in the same cycle. A few captains swore they saw human ships, real ships, moving in coordinated formations, then disappearing as if swallowed by the shadows. Between stars, the Council had dismissed those claims as exaggerations brought on by long deployment rotations. Now, they weren't so sure. Back in the chamber, one member raised a question no one wanted to hear. What if humanity has already moved beyond what we see? What if they allowed us to think they were behind when they were actually years ahead? No one answered. They didn't need to. The fear was starting to feel too real to calm the rising panic. The Council requested a detailed psychological profile on humanity. The report was blunt. Humans were capable of fierce loyalty, relentless curiosity, and explosive anger when threatened. They could unite faster than most species when a common enemy appeared. And now the Council had made themselves that enemy. The tension only grew when the technicians revealed their final report. They had discovered something hidden beneath the Council's communication grid, on unfamiliar echo. A lingering trace of the human signal that hadn't disappeared when the message ended. The echo appeared to move, changing patterns every few seconds, as if it were searching for something. Some believed it was simply an artifact left behind in the system. Others feared it was deliberate, a sort of code that hadn't finished its purpose yet. The technicians couldn't remove it. The Council ordered them to keep trying. But the technicians only exchanged uneasy glances. They had been working in shifts for hours, and the echo still pulsed like a quiet heartbeat beneath the system. Only one technician dared to voice what the others were thinking. If this is human, then it's not just a message. It's a presence. That thought didn't sit well with anyone, while the council debated far away on Earth. The planet's population remained unaware of the galactic decision made against them. But not everyone was blind to the danger. In various corners of the world, quiet labs, hidden bunkers, observatories that never disclosed their full capabilities, groups of researchers and strategists had already detected hints of galactic interest long before the council suspected. They had intercepted fragments of foreign signals, tracked unusual shadows moving across the sky, and spotted faint traces of alien probes slipping through Earth's upper atmosphere. For years, these groups had worked independently, unsure whether what they detected was real or just errors in their instruments. Then something changed. They began finding each other, connecting tiny pieces that formed a much larger truth. They shared evidence, decoded strange transmissions, built machines no government dared to publicly acknowledge. And slowly, quietly, they prepared. Some had guessed that hostile forces might one day vote against Earth. No one knew when. No one knew how. But they prepared anyway. They didn't intend to wait helplessly if the attack came. These were the same people responsible for the mysterious ships that appeared on the Scout sensors. They were the ones who developed new forms of energy that didn't match any known patterns. They were the ones who built communications, technology capable of reaching the Galactic Council without ever leaving. But not even they could predict how the Council would react. Back in the Hall of Accord, the debate reached a boiling point. Some argued that they had to strike before humanity could act. Others insisted that a full invasion would now be too dangerous, that humans might have already secured alliances with unknown species, or created weapons even the Council didn't understand. The Council split into factions, each claiming they knew the correct path forward. One group demanded proof that humans possessed real power. Another insisted that the human messages were nothing more than a bluff designed to cause panic. A few, the cautious voices lost among the shouting, warned that underestimating humanity again would be the mistake that doomed them all. Then the floor shook. It was soft at first, like a distant rumble. Then stronger, rolling through the chamber in sharp pulses that rattled the great pillars lining the hall. Lights flickered again. Panels warped. A few delegates fled toward the exits, though no one knew what they were running from. A new signal appeared on the main display. No message. No words, just a steady wave pattern that pulsed with rhythmic precision. It looked almost like a monitor tracking a heartbeat. But the pulse grew louder, brighter, filling the entire screen until it washed the chamber in white light. The Council fell silent. Everyone leaned forward, waiting for the next moment. Waiting for the message they feared might come, but nothing appeared. The screen went blank. The light steadied. The tremor stopped, yet no one relaxed. The pulse hadn't been a threat. It had been something worse, another reminder that humanity was already inside their systems, already watching, already responding. One council member whispered, "They're not attacking. They're warning us," another answered, voice shaking. If that was a warning, what happens when they stop warning? The chamber grew cold and deep beneath the surface of the Council's world. Sensors detected a new disturbance, something arriving in the outer layers of their atmosphere. Something moving fast, something that didn't match any known design. The Council hadn't sent it, and it wasn't one of theirs. The alarms began to rise again. Whatever was coming, it wasn't slowing down. The alarms shook the chamber before anyone could regain their composure. They rose like a rolling wave, echoing through the steep corridors of the Council complex, bouncing off the stone and metal like distant thunder. The representatives stumbled to their stations, each one trying to speak over the noise, but the alerts drowned out everything. The incoming object, whatever it was, had pierced the outer atmosphere of the Council's world in a way no known ship could. It didn't slow down. It didn't transmit. It didn't act like anything they had ever scanned before. The technicians tried to lock onto it with long-range sensors, but every attempt came back scrambled. The object shifted frequencies each time they scanned, almost as though it anticipated their detection methods and adjusted itself. Some thought it was a human ship. Others insisted humans were nowhere near this kind of power. A few claimed it might be something built with human guidance, but not human in origin. That idea frightened them most. When the object finally did slow, just beyond the lower atmosphere, its silhouette appeared on the central display. It wasn't large. That was the first thing they noticed. Smaller than any Council cruiser, smaller even than their surveillance patrol craft. Yet it held position against the planet's gravity without effort, hovering like it weighed nothing at all. Its outline kept shifting, as if its surface didn't stay solid for more than a moment, shimmering between metallic sharpness and ghostly transparency. No one watching could tell where the ship ended and the air around it began. One representative whispered the obvious question, "Is that human technology?" None of them wanted the answer. While the Council scrambled to regain control, far below the chamber, the planet's security forces snapped into motion. Teams swept through the city, sealing routes to the surface, locking down skylanes, preparing defenses that they hoped they'd never need to use. Soldiers hurried through the corridors with long rifles and glowing shields, though every one of them knew they were preparing for an enemy they didn't understand. Rumors spread faster than Command's humans had arrived. Humans were invading. Humans had somehow crossed the stars and found their world. But the truth was more complicated. Because at that same moment, millions of kilometers away across the quiet dark Earth was just as shaken. In small underground rooms, quiet observatories, forgotten desert antennas, and sealed bunkers humming with strange machinery, the people who had intercepted the Council's vote gathered again. They weren't soldiers. They weren't politicians. Most had no titles at all. But they were the ones who had pieced together the scattered warnings. Who had tested energy fields the world wasn't ready for? Who had built the ships that appeared on alien sensors? They were the ones who had sent the message, "We see you," and the one that followed. And they had not sent the object now descending over the Council's planet. The humans monitoring the feeds saw the anomaly immediately a new ripple. A foreign energy signature. Something slipping into the same network they'd been hiding in. It wasn't from the Council. And it wasn't from Earth. Something else is moving, one of the researchers said quietly, staring at the data. Something using our path. Or using something older than both of us. No one liked that idea. If the Council wasn't the only threat, then Earth's preparation hadn't been enough. Back in the Hall of Accord, the representatives watched as the floating object finally made its first move. A single beam descended from its underside, but it wasn't a weapon. It was a projection, forming a dull sphere of light just above the chamber floor. The sphere flickered, then brightened, then steadied into a smooth surface. It shed no warmth. It hummed with energy that no sensor could identify. Voices stilled. The sphere shifted, forming blurry shapes on its surface shapes that looked like landscapes or cities. But none the Council recognized. They glowed with soft, drifting light, like reflections on water, stirred by wind. The images changed too quickly to interpret, almost as though they were being cycled through without pattern. One representative leaned forward, staring so closely that his nose nearly touched the sphere. "What does this mean?" No one answered. The images suddenly stopped. The surface of the sphere darkened, then brightened again, forming a single clear figure. A human silhouette. The Council felt the weight of that image settle over them like a shadow. But this figure looked different from the last one. The stance was sharper, more focused, almost as if the silhouette was studying them with the same intensity they once used when observing Earth. And for one long moment, the entire room felt like prey being measured by a predator. Then the image changed again. This time, it was not a human. It was something taller, thinner, wrapped in a shape the Council couldn't identify, a species none of them had recorded. The figure's outline wavered like smoke caught in slow wind. Its arms stretched longer than any known anatomy, and its head seemed to split at the top into branching points, like the limbs of an ancient tree. It had no face, only a shifting glow in place of eyes. The chamber grew cold. One of the oldest representatives, who had lived long enough to remember long-buried stories, whispered, That looks like one of the old ones." The others froze at the phrase, "old ones," not myth, not rumor. Ancient beings believed to have vanished before most species had even formed their first governments. Some said they had left traces behind ruins, artifacts, strange energy pockets hidden in space, but no one had ever found them alive. The projection rippled again, and a new image flashed, dozens of these beings moving through a starfield, then fading into nothing as the sphere's light blinked. The Council erupted into panic. Some shouted that the object came from humans. Others claimed it was a warning from the old ones. A few believed the humans had awakened something they shouldn't have. But every theory felt too small, too fragile, too late. While the Council fought among themselves, the floating object outside the atmosphere began to rotate, slowly at first, then faster. Its surface shimmered with streaks of blue and violet light, like distant storms trapped within a shell. The sensors reading it began to overload one by one. Screens flickered. Consoles sparked. A soft vibration passed through the entire structure of the Council complex, humming through the floors and walls like the slow beat of a heart. But the object still didn't attack. It just waited. A watching presence. A silent witness. Meanwhile, Earth's hidden network of watchers struggled to keep up. They detected another set of faint signals, hidden behind layers of interference so old the patterns didn't match any known code. The signals weren't directed at Earth, but they were moving through the same channels humans had opened. Someone else or something else was using the path. "It's not an ally," one of the humans said quietly. "It's not an enemy either. It's something ancient." Another leaned back in his chair, staring at the stream of data with widening eyes. "It's listening to both sides." And that was the part that worried them. Because whatever this third presence was, it wasn't acting randomly. It had chosen to appear now. It had chosen to reveal itself to the Council. And it had chosen to appear with the silhouette of a human. As if it wanted both sides to understand one thing: humanity was not the only variable in this war. Back on the Council world, the projected sphere began to dim. The figure of the ancient being blurred, then faded. The sphere shrank slightly, compressing itself like a breath being drawn inward. The Council watched in terrified silence. A final pulse of light rippled across the sphere's surface, a pulse that almost looked like a warning signal. Then the projection vanished. The object outside the planet shifted upward, rising into the higher atmosphere, rotating as if preparing to leave. For a moment, the Council dared to hope that whatever it was had finished its purpose. But before it departed, it released one last burst of energy, a soft wave that rolled across the planet. Harmless at first glance, but impossible to analyze. Sensors picked up traces of unknown particles settling into the planet's air, its oceans, its soil. A silent mark, a quiet signature, something left behind. Then the object shot upward, disappearing into the black in a burst of light that left afterimages burning in every viewer's eyes. The Council stood in stunned silence. But the technicians saw something the Council didn't. A new message had appeared in their system. It wasn't from humans. It wasn't from the Council. It wasn't from anything recorded. It simply said, "You were not the first to choose war." And beneath it, another line pulsed softly, "And you will not choose the last." The council stared at the message, fear spreading like cracks through old stone. Because now they understood. Humanity was preparing for them. But something older was preparing for both. The council chamber felt hollow after the ancient message faded, as if something had drained the air from the room and replaced it with a quiet, heavy dread. No one knew what to say. No one even dared move at first. The screens continued to flicker with fragments of unreadable code, the last traces of whatever force had just passed through their world. Outside, the sky still shimmered faintly from the energy wave the strange object had released. Like the atmosphere was holding on to a memory it didn't understand. Representatives paced in circles or sat trembling in their seats, whispering half-formed theories to one another. Some argued that humanity had awakened a power older than the council itself. Others insisted the old ones had returned on their own, choosing this moment for reasons beyond comprehension. The fact that no one knew the truth made everything worse, and threaded through all of it quiet but undeniable was a growing sense that whatever had begun was far bigger than a vote to invade Earth. In a corner of the hall, one of the younger council members studied the fading code on the console. Her eyes followed the strange symbols, trying to track patterns where none existed. The symbols didn't match any known language, but they didn't move randomly either. She noticed a rhythm, a looping structure, almost like the echo of a voice speaking a language her mind wasn't built to hear. Every time she blinked, the sequence shifted. It felt alive. She stepped back, heart hammering, and whispered, "We were already being watched." Meanwhile, far from the council's world, Earth's hidden network was scrambling to keep up with a flood of new signals. Screens across their underground base lit with warnings, energy waves spreading through the council's atmosphere. A foreign object leaving traces in its wake, and a message unlike anything they had ever intercepted. The researchers leaned over terminals in tense silence, exchanging confused glances as they attempted to decode fragments of the alien transmission. "This isn't aimed at us," one muttered. "It's aimed at them. But why show us the same message?" Another asked. No one answered. They didn't have to. The meaning was obvious. The old ones, if that's what they truly were, wanted both sides to know they were present. One technician isolated a waveform, buried beneath the main message. Unlike the rest of the signal, this one felt almost human. A whisper made of static and broken sound. When amplified, it formed something that might have been words, but they were too warped to fully understand. Still, they understood enough. "It's not done," the technician said, backing away from the console. "Whatever sent that, it's coming back." Back on the council world, the representatives finally forced themselves to regroup. They commanded full system scans of the entire planet. They ordered patrol fleets into the upper atmosphere. They mobilized their military in ways they hadn't done for hundreds of years. But every attempt to regain control only exposed how little they understood. Communications to outer colonies came back scrambled. Long-distance probes reported strange distortions in space, like ripples moving through the void. And the Council's oldest archive, systems databases thousands of years old, suddenly began unlocking files that no one had touched in. Ages. Files marked with warnings, files sealed before the Council's founding, files referencing stories of the ancient Watchers, beings who observed civilizations, judged them, and intervened when the balance of power shifted too far toward destruction. Stories dismissed as old myths, nothing more than relics of a time when the universe seemed too vast to understand, but now those myths felt like warnings they had ignored. One of the files described how the ancient Watchers never acted without reason. They appeared only when a conflict risked spiraling into a war capable of collapsing systems. and the Council's vote to invade Earth combined with humanity's hidden rise had created exactly that kind of spark. A representative slammed his fist against his console. "We triggered something we can't control," another shot back. "Humans triggered it too. They built ships in secret. They sent messages across the stars. They provoked this." But beneath all the shouting was a simple truth. Neither side was in control anymore, and the old ones seemed interested in the outcome. As the Council argued, a sharp tremor cut through the chamber, more intense than before. The lights flickered. The air hummed. Walls shuddered like something was pushing against them from the outside. Technicians looked at their screens in horror. "Something is entering our orbit." Again, the Council members braced themselves, expecting another shimmering vessel like the first. But this one was different. The image on the screen was dark, almost invisible except for the faint outline of its shape. It didn't reflect light. It swallowed it. A smooth absence, like a tear in space itself. Even the scanners struggled to track it. "What are we looking at?" asked a trembling voice. The lead technician only shook his head. "Something older." The object drifted closer, stopping just above the planet's exosphere. It hovered there without motion, without sound, like a shadow made solid. The Council fell silent as they watched it. No one dared speak. Then a whisper echoed through the chamber. It wasn't spoken aloud. It wasn't transmitted through any system. It simply appeared inside their minds, not words, exactly. More like a thought carried by pressure and light. "We do not choose sides. We witness." The representatives staggered back, clutching their heads. Some collapsed. Others trembled uncontrollably. The presence behind the voice felt vast, cold, ancient. Older than any empire, any species, any star the Council had mapped. It felt like a memory woven into the fabric of the universe itself. And then, just as quickly as it came, the voice withdrew. Across the galaxy, Earth's hidden network felt it too. The researchers flinched as a buzzing pressure hit them all at once, like invisible electricity crawling across their skin. Screens flickered. Machines shut down. Papers drifted from desks in a sudden gust of cold air. And in that moment, every human in the room felt the same message brush against their thoughts. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't hostile. It was simply watching. The leader of the human group steadied herself against the table. It's not attacking. It's observing. Observing what? Someone asked. She swallowed hard. Us. Them. The whole mess we've created. A second researcher leaned back, eyes wide with realization. It's waiting to see how far we'll go. Back on the Council world, the atmosphere rippled again. This time, not from the ancient watchers, but from something else moving quickly through space. Council sensors caught the new signatures instantly. Human ships, but not the ghostly prototypes detected earlier in the outer system. These were different, larger, more solid, crawling with energy the scanners couldn't categorize. They weren't approaching the planet aggressively. They weren't broadcasting any signals. They simply arrived and held formation, hovering at the edge of the Council's territory like a force ready to respond if the situation escalated. The Council erupted in panic. They're here. They planned this. They're waiting for us to make a mistake. The younger representative who had studied the ancient code felt her heart race. She stepped closer to the display, examining the human ships. Their design wasn't like anything her species had recorded. The lines were sharp but elegant, their cores glowing with energy far beyond anything humanity had publicly used before. The humans weren't threatening, not yet, but they were making a statement. Earth was no longer in the dark, as fear spread through the Council. The ancient shadow in near orbit remained still, silent. watching both sides with a presence that stretched across dimensions. It didn't speak again. It didn't need to. Both sides understood. Now, this conflict was no longer a simple war. It was a test, and no one knew what the Watchers expected. Suddenly, a bright flare lit up the darkness between the human ships and the Council's world. A rift opened just for a moment, like space itself had been sliced with a blade. The light erupted into a wave that washed over both sides, blinding sensors and scrambling communications. When it faded, new signals appeared on every screen. Not human, not Council, not Ancient Watcher. Something else, something new. Something entering the conflict for the first time. And as the signals locked onto both sides, every leader, human and alien alike, felt the same cold truth. The real threat had finally arrived. The sudden flare that split the void left everyone reeling. Sensors struggled to recalibrate, and communications across the Council world faltered as the new signals filled every channel with a pulse of unknown energy. For a tense moment, silence reigned, not the calm of safety, but the fragile pause of survival, where every creature waited to see which way the universe would turn. Then the signals began to coalesce into forms recognizable enough to inspire awe rather than fear. Ships, massive and intricate, materialized through the rift. Their designs were alien yet elegant, with flowing lines and radiant cores that pulsed with soft, living light. They moved not as individual vessels, but as a single organism, a unified force guided by intent rather than command. The humans, watching from their hidden networks, whispered to one another, realizing that these weren't warships in the traditional sense. They were sentinels. Guardians activated in response to the Council's vote, humanity's rise, and the presence of the Ancient Watchers. On the Council world, representatives stumbled backward, struggling to comprehend the sudden turn of events. Panic erupted, first shouts, cries, accusations, but the appearance of the Sentinels forced even the most stubborn voices into silence. The machines could barely keep up, their screens flooded with readings beyond comprehension. The leaders realized, with growing dread and awe, that they had been playing a dangerous game on a stage far larger than they had ever imagined. Their decision to invade Earth had triggered not a simple war, but the awakening of forces older and wiser than any council. A voice, calm but resonant, filled the chamber. Not a voice in words, but in understanding, a direct transmission into consciousness. It belonged to the Sentinels, or perhaps to the consciousness that guided them. You were chosen to act, yet your choice has been tested. Humanity survives not by conquest, but by balance. Let the lessons of this moment guide your path. For a moment, no one moved. The weight of the message sank into every being present. They saw clearly that neither aggression nor fear could dictate the outcome. The Council's arrogance, the humans' secret preparations, even the shadow of the Ancient Watchers, they were all threads in a web of consequences that demanded careful thought. The human teams monitoring the event on Earth felt the same weight. The pulse of the Sentinels' energy washed over their networks, illuminating hidden patterns, revealing old paths in space, and uncovering signals that had long been lost. For the first time, humans understood their own rise not as mere survival, but as a turning point in galactic history. Every ship they had built, every code they had transmitted in secrecy, every preparation in hidden bunkers had contributed to a balance far greater than any one species could control, as the realization spread across both sides. The Sentinels made their final motion. They did not attack. They did not destroy. Instead, they formed a protective formation between Earth and the Council world. A luminous barrier of energy that seemed almost alive. Its light washed over the planet's surface, stabilizing atmospheric disturbances and nullifying the dangerous rifts created by the unknown forces earlier. To those watching, it was a clear and unmistakable sign. Conflict would not be allowed to escalate. At least, not while the Sentinels were present. On the Council world, the leaders gathered around the central display, silent but shaken. One representative, the same young scholar who had been piecing together the code from the ancient Watchers, stepped forward. "We underestimated the humans," she said softly. "And we underestimated the consequences of our own arrogance. But perhaps there's still a chance to act wisely." Another nodded slowly. "Perhaps the lesson here is not about dominance, but cooperation. If we continue to fight blindly, we risk more than our own species. We risk the balance the universe has entrusted to us all." Across the hall, others murmured agreement. A hesitant but growing acknowledgement that their vote to invade Earth had been the catalyst for a reckoning. The fear that had held them paralyzed began to shift into determination, a cautious resolve to change course before history repeated itself in catastrophic ways. Back on Earth, the human teams watched the Council's movements through the sensors they had access to. They realized that, for the first time, diplomacy and understanding might matter as much as firepower. Humanity had survived the Council's threat not through a show of strength alone, but through preparation, vigilance, and the subtle guidance of forces far older than their planet. The humans didn't celebrate victory. They understood that their survival was temporary without continued wisdom and caution. For a brief moment, the ancient Watchers, too, seemed to linger, their presence a quiet hum across the cosmos. They did not intervene directly, nor did they speak again. Their purpose had been served: to awaken the Council, to test humanity, and to remind all involved that the universe was wider and more intricate than any species could claim. Their shadow receded into the stars, leaving a lingering sense of awareness. A quiet reminder that the balance of power was fragile and precious. The Council world began to adjust. Communications were re-established, fleets were recalled, and a new Council session was called not to plan invasion, but to deliberate on a course of diplomacy and restraint. The same young scholar who had first understood the ancient code was appointed to lead a delegation to open dialogue with humanity. A symbol of humility and wisdom replacing arrogance. Across the planet, citizens and soldiers alike looked toward the sky with a mixture of awe and hope, aware that they had witnessed the brink of destruction and the mercy of forces far beyond their comprehension. On Earth, life returned to its quiet routines, though nothing could ever truly be the same. Humanity had grown, not through conquest, but through the lessons of observation, preparation, and restraint. Scientists continued to study the residual energies left by the Sentinels, not to build weapons, but to understand the wider universe and humanity's role within it. And though the skies were now full of unknown possibilities, humans felt for the first time a connection to the broader galactic stage, not as pawns, not as targets, but as participants in a living, delicate balance. Months passed. The Sentinels lingered at the edge of known space, their presence a reminder of what had been learned. The Council world began to reform its priorities, investing in exploration, understanding, and negotiation rather than war. Humanity continued to advance, cautiously, aware that the shadows of ancient forces and cosmic watchers could always return. Yet the sense of fear had transformed into determination, a recognition that vigilance, wisdom, and courage mattered far more than any single act of aggression. And though questions remained about the old ones, the exact purpose of the Sentinels, and the unseen watchers still moving in the dark the universe, now held a new equilibrium. One defined not by fear or domination, but by the understanding that even the smallest choices could ripple across the stars, touching lives and shaping destinies in ways no one could fully predict. In quiet moments, humans would look to the skies and wonder, what else waited beyond the stars? What lessons had yet to be learned? And what role would they play when those lessons finally revealed themselves? The answers were not yet clear. But one thing was certain: humanity had survived its first true test, and it had emerged not as a conqueror, but as a participant in a universe far more alive and intricate than it had ever imagined. The Council, now humbled, sent emissaries to Earth. The dialogue began not with threats, but with questions, not with demands, but with curiosity. Across both worlds, the knowledge that the galaxy was not theirs to command, but theirs to navigate, became the guiding principle. Humanity had been challenged, observed, and tested, and had proven itself capable not only of survival, but of growth, foresight, and cooperation, and somewhere beyond the stars, in the quiet void where light barely reached, the Sentinels remained. Their silent watch continued, not as judges, but as guardians of balance. Their presence, unseen and unfathomable, reminded every species that the universe was vast, alive, and always listening. The vote to invade Earth had been cast, and the consequences had almost shattered everything. Yet in the end, the reckoning had brought something unexpected: awareness, restraint, and a fragile hope for the future. Humanity, the Council, and even the ancient Watchers had learned that power alone was meaningless without wisdom. The stars, vast and infinite, stretched on, and among them, humans looked upward not with fear, not with arrogance, but with curiosity, courage, and a newfound sense of belonging in a galaxy that had finally taken notice of them. The test was over. The future was not yet written. But for the first time, humanity understood that it had a role to play. That role was worth every risk, every challenge, and every lesson learned.